Path of Exile has been getting a little bit more expensive recently, at least to do most of the content in the game. In days past, there were a ton of builds that could easily do every single bit of content without very much investment. However, those days are kind of changing a little bit. We need a little bit more currency to be able to get these new builds, and most of the builds that can do all the content for very cheap, I've already covered. So thinking of that, so that you guys can join me on this quest to find all of these extra builds that maybe cost a little bit more money, I've decided to teach you all how to actually make a ton of currency without too much investment. Blighted maps can be pretty intimidating for some people. It's a large upfront investment that you can just completely fail and lose all of your money. But with some simple changes and knowing how to actually lay your towers, you too can actually complete high tier red blighted maps rolled and corrupted with almost any build. And you don't have to worry too much about losing it unless it's a really, really difficult map. Hey guys, Big Ducks here, and welcome back to the channel. Now remember, if you're enjoying this style of content, make sure that you like this video so that YouTube knows to recommend you more of it. Also, over 71% of you are still not subscribed to this YouTube channel. So if you want to stay up to date with all the latest content, and you don't want to miss any of my videos, make sure to subscribe so that these videos will show right up in your feed, and you can always change your mind later. Now without further ado, let's get back into the video. Alright boys, so remember there's going to be a bunch to go over in this video, so make sure that you check out the timestamps and chapters that are below if you want to jump to a specific section. Maybe there's some particular part that you've been interested in, you can always find it there. But for anybody who needs the entire video, well, if you haven't been watching over my Twitch stream at twitch.tv/bigducks, which you should go follow by the way, we have been running a bunch of blighted maps. Now, blighted maps is something that I have been doing for quite some time. I have an old guide about this from probably a year or two ago now, but it does have a little bit of outdated information. I wanted to update it, I wanted to see how good Blight was and make sure that, you know, I still had, you know, the skills that I thought that I did. So we spent a little bit of time. I wanted to see if I could invest in 50 blighted maps from tier 13 to tier 16. The reason that we're using those is because that's where golden oils can actually drop, and I wanted to see how much money that we can make off of it. Well, we invested roughly 2,000 chaos, I'm pretty sure, all things considered. That's going to be buying the maps, rolling the maps, actually putting the oils on the maps, etc. So roughly 2,000 chaos is what we spent, and we made about 4,000 chaos beyond that, so 6,000 chaos total. So all things considered, with the price of Exalts kind of fluctuating a little bit, we made 30-ish Exalt profit, and we had invested 15 at the beginning. So 45 total Exalt gained, 15 investment. Now, the vast majority of that money, once again, is really going to be coming from stacked decks, as well as just a bunch of oils that we got here. Now, we didn't get as many tainted oils as I was hoping, but we did actually find 2. Now, tainted oils are a new thing that's been introduced in a recent patch. It allows you to enchant corrupted items, so you don't have to worry about, like, you know how if you corrupted an item for some kind of implicit, but then you couldn't put a blight enchant on it, and talismans were kind of useless? Well, this does help with that, and it's worth a decent amount of money. Beyond that, we found a bunch of decent uniques, like we found a Soul Taker and a Cloak of Defiance, both pretty decent, bunch of gems, bunch of extra little doodads. There's not a ton of money, particularly in this tab. This tab has a little bit of money because breach stones are so expensive right now, but we did get quite a few scarabs as well. So the scarabs actually ended up being a decent amount of money, and then beyond that, we got a bunch of divination cards, some good ones in here. There are some like Exalt cards and things like that, among other things. We do have quite a bit if we're going to just own. We did get pretty much all of these cards, and most of them are worth at least a little bit, not a ton, but it is what it is. A bunch of essences, you can sell these quite well, and then a bunch of delve items as well. So all in all, roughly 30x is what all of this together is worth if we sold everything. I haven't been going through the time to sell most of this, but we were pretty fair on that. The actual numbers for what we have is closer to like 35 to 40, but assuming that you don't actually sell everything, assuming that not everything sells easily, you make about 30x off of it. Now, whether or not that was lucky or not, we did 50 blighted maps, which I think is a pretty decent amount. It took us about 2 solid days of running them to get everything finished. Now, the character that I used for this was the Exsanguinate character. This is a pretty typical Exsanguinate character with maybe a little tiny bit of a twist. I know that a lot of people play the Exsanguinate characters like the Spell Slinger, and then there is the self-cast version as well. Self-cast was a little hard to get going properly, but a member of my community named Dave sent me a POB. I checked it out. We spent a little bit of time optimizing it, and we got it working pretty well. This build will be coming out soon-ish. I don't know when I'm going to make the guide for it. I need to work a little bit on the like come-up version, because right now it doesn't really work as a leveling build unless you particularly go Spellslinger. But more on that in the future. Look forward to a video guide on that soon. But this build ended up being quite good for Blights because we have self-cast here and we do have Chain. And because this ability does have Chain on it, it chains 2 times, and we can clear pretty much an entire screen and a little bit further beyond with just a single cast. It made it quite good for what we were looking to do. We do a pretty decent amount of damage, most of it is clear, and the build is relatively tanky. You can see that we are using the Petrified Blood Lowlife. It's a little bit interesting to get going, but like I said, we'll talk more about that in the other video. When it comes to actually builds for doing this kind of strategy, you can use most anything. You can use something as cheap as my Toxic Rain Raider, you can use Creeping Frost, you can use a super high investment character if you want. The more damage that you do, the easier that the strategy does get, but we'll talk more about particular strategies in a moment. Let's talk about actually getting blighted maps, how to drop them if you can't afford them, how to make money off of just dropping them, as well as how to roll them and run them yourself if that's something you want to do. So the first part of the strategy is going to be actually about how to get blighted maps to drop. Now you could make this your entire strategy. If you don't like doing blight maps, but you still want to make money off of them, it is actually quite simple to make a ton of currency here in Lyra Arthane. I think that Lyra Arthane is actually one of the more maybe underappreciated zones. I know a lot of people are doing Valdo's Rest farming right now, but I do feel like Lyra Arthane actually has quite a bit going for it, because of Heist as well as Blight. Now the main reason for that is going to be epidemiology. This gives Blight chests in areas have 100% more chance to contain blighted maps. Blighted maps found in areas are anointed. So what this means is that on average, if you're doing blights in this region, you have 100% more chance. Keep in mind, that is just a doubled chance to drop blighted maps. 100% more doesn't mean that, you know, you're just having like a 100% chance to drop them. It's 100% more like anything else in this game. The other thing is that maps found in areas have 5% chance to have an area contains an additional blight encounter. This can just be something that'll help you push through a couple more maps to maybe get some more blighted maps. Now, if you combine these with any map from the Lyra Arthane area and you put blight scarabs on them, you'll notice here that it says area contains an additional blight encounter, or area contains an additional blight encounter, has an additional boss, area contains a blight encounter, a boss, and 50% chance for blight chests to contain an additional reward. So if you use these as well as just rolling maps like you normally would, and on top of that you can go to the map device and run something like Heist on it, you can make some pretty serious profits just running any map. It doesn't really matter what it is. Sell the blighted maps that you drop, sell the oils that you get, sell any of the contracts or any of the blueprints that you find from the Heist mobs, and as well as the coins that you get from Heist. All of that combined, plus any normal drops that you get, will be a serious amount of currency. Now that's the first half of what you can do. The second half is actually going to be, do you want to run the blighted maps? You need a little bit of strategy, and we're going to go over how and what towers you're supposed to be using. There are two separate strategies that you can do, and we're going to talk about both of them. So for each of these strategies, you do need specific ring anoints. Now, neither of these are going to be very expensive when it comes to the anoints. However, you do have to actually use the particular ones. Now, the first strategy you've probably heard of. This is the one that most people know about. However, I do feel it is a little bit inferior unless you have a very powerful build. If you have a weaker build or you like tower defense, look at the second strategy that's going to come immediately after this one. This one is going to be scout towers. Now, most people know about this. You just anoint both of your rings with scout towers have increased range. Some people like to say you can do one range, one damage. I think that double range seems to make the most sense. All that you do is you just spam scout towers, you make sure that there's a tier 3 empowering tower near each of them, and then you just put in level 1 seismic towers, level 1 slowing towers, and you just go to town, and you just let it all run through. That works perfectly fine. However, I did find that with that strategy, I was having a little bit more issue on much more difficult rolled maps than I was on my normal strategy that I use. But for this, you're going to be wanting to do the enchant that gives you your scout towers have a 25% increased range. To do this, you're going to need a violet oil as well as a teal oil. So what you're going to do is you're going to go and you're either going to buy these oils, or if you have them, you're going to take a violet oil as well as a teal oil. You'll take this either to your tab here that you can use, but I'll show you on Cassia. I'm going to go to anoint items, pop your item in here, put the 2 items in, you'll have scout tower range is increased. That is the one that you're going to want to use for specifically that strategy with scout towers. Now, there are a ton of videos out there that will show you how to do the scout tower strategy. It is relatively simple, completely brain dead. Pretty much anybody can do it, but at the very, very high end of blighted maps, I feel like it is a little bit weaker, so I want to talk about the other strategy. And that other strategy does use a couple different oils. The other strategy uses enchants on your rings for your empowering towers. Now, I actually don't think that in the currency that I made, I was picking up azure oils, but we do need an azure as well as a sepia oil, so we will grab 2 of these out of here. Now, this enchant is going to make your empowering towers stronger, so you put your ring in there with the azure as well as the sepia. Empowering tower effect is increased by 25%. This is extremely powerful for my particular strategy that I'm using, which is going to be used using mostly arc towers as well as meteor towers for single target, and that's going to be the main focus of this video. The scout tower one, you make a bunch of scout towers, you make some stun towers, you make sure empowering towers reach all of them, and you're pretty much done. However, if you want to be a little bit better, I suggest going with this. Now there's a couple things that you should keep in mind. There are a few different strategies that you can do, but I found that this one ended up being the best. We tried anything from silver oils to crimson oils, opalescent oils, all kinds of things. The best, like, bang for your buck, in my opinion, is going to be 3 crimson. Now, when you buy these blighted maps, there's going to be a wide variety of them. If you're doing this in bulk, you can buy these on the TFT Discord. That's probably going to be the best way if you're not a streamer that can buy them from chat. But they will probably come with some random kind of anointment. You'll probably see a bunch of stuff on them. The anointment that I do suggest is going to be 3 crimson. This is going to give us 30 blight chests are lucky. Now, you can do other oils. There are other oils that do good things, like opalescent will give you 45 blight chests that are lucky. Opalescent is a little bit more expensive, but if you did want to invest in that, you could absolutely. Opalescents are perfectly fine, so if you want to spend a little bit more money, go for that. Some people have been doing silver oils. This is going to give you a ton of quantity. However, in years past, it's always been lucky chests in Blight that have given the best results, so keep in mind, a silver oil is going to be like, I don't know, like 12 to 15C most of the time, so spending that much on each map might be a little bit more expensive. I personally went with crimsons. It worked perfectly fine, made a ton of money off of it. You might be able to do opalescence if you want to, but either way, we're going to be anointing with crimsons. So what does lucky mean in Path of Exile? Lucky means that the item is going to roll 2 times and it's going to take whatever the better of the rolls are. Now, typically what that means is for things like Diamond Flask, but here it means that if you are going to be seeing varieties of items contained in 30 blight chests are lucky, it's going to take all of the items that could drop from a chest and roll it twice. Whatever gives you the better variety of it is going to be the one that it chooses. Lucky is typically pretty good. So beyond that, we're going to take this into our other tab. We are going to chisel these because quantity does actually matter now for blighted maps. Before, it really didn't do anything, and that was the reason that you ran your blighted maps white. Nowadays, the map item quantity modifiers affect blight chest counts at 20% value, so you do actually want to roll these maps. Now, what I personally have been doing is I've been chiseling them up, rolling them yellow, seeing what mods we get. Now, this is kind of whatever. Unique Boss has more life is a little bit dangerous. You are going to need to tailor what you see on your maps to your build. It really depends. Most of the mods that are very dangerous are going to be mods that make the enemies tankier. Keep in mind that enemies cannot be stunned is very dangerous if you're using my strategy. More monster life can be a little bit spooky, things like that, so keep that in mind. Now, beyond that, if you do want to be able to drop these tainted oils, you do have to corrupt the map. Now, there is potential that when you corrupt this map, you make it like horrifically difficult, completely undoable for your build. Just keep that in mind. You might have to sell it back. So we're going to go ahead and corrupt this map, see what happens. It went unidentified. Unidentified just means we get a little bit more quantity on it. The map should stay the same. So beyond this, you can actually run these with fragments or scarabs if you'd like to. Now, the thing about running them with scarabs is going to be there's not a ton of scarabs that are super useful here. The vast majority of the money from blighted maps is really going to be just from currency drops as well as like cards that you can get. We're talking stacked decks rather. Stacked decks are going to be a large source of currency. You can get just like random divination cards. You can get lots of other cool things like that and oils. So most of these scarabs that I've looked through didn't really do very much for me. So I didn't really see too much use of doing them. So I just go with 3 or 4 if you really want to be, bougie. If you have an upgraded map device, which I don't at the moment, I just went with 3 fragments. Nothing here can be ran on them. You can't do master missions. You can't do anything extra. It's just going to be quantity. So we'll pop this map open. This is a tier 14 map. As I said before, we do tier 13 to 16 because those are the maps that are capable of dropping golden oils, and we'll go ahead. Now, the one thing about blighted maps compared to other investment strategies when it comes to making money in Path of Exile is that blighted maps are a little bit more bursty when it comes to how much currency you get out of them. On average, you are going to get a decent amount of money, but you will hit like little droughts for periods of time, and you just have to work through those. So keep in mind, just like anything else in Path of Exile, if you do something once or twice, you really haven't figured it out. You got to do something like 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 times before you can really tell if it's worth the money. That's why we did 50 blighted maps and it ended up being pretty good. Now, the first thing that I'm going to recommend to you when you do initially begin trying to do blighted maps, especially rolled blighted maps, which can be extremely difficult, is you should go look around the area, make sure you get kind of a lay of the land and where everything is. So the worst possible thing that can happen to you is having the blight pump be in the middle of something and just have every direction open. Best possible thing that can happen is a blight pump near a wall and have only a few directions open to you. Now the reason for this is that most of the difficulty of blighted maps really comes down to how the blighted map lays itself out, where the pump shoots all of its tendrils and where the portals spawn. That is 95% of the difficulty. I've had tier 16 blighted maps with the most ridiculous mods be absolutely pushover maps completely fine. I've had tier 13 maps with the easiest mods I've ever seen completely annihilate me in really, really rare circumstances. So what you need to keep in mind is where those actual tendrils are coming out. So what I do is I pop the device open, I take a look at what's down here, so you can see that lightning towers are a little bit immune here, and we've got some stun towers. Now, in cases if you're doing like the minion strategy and you get like 10 towers that are immune to minions, you might have a little bit of a difficult time early on, but just keep in mind, these towers that say immune here will make it so that the mobs cannot be stunned by seismic towers. These towers that have like fire or lightning are going to take significantly less damage from them, so keep that in mind. Now, what you're looking for are choke points. Now, if we look at the way that this laid out, you'll see that we've got two paths here, and we are pretty close to the pump. Now, something that a lot of people don't know is that if you get really far away from your towers, they actually turn off. You've got about a screen or two of range, so you do want to stay close to this pump. So this area right here is actually really good. It's a nice choke point between these two portions here, and we have a nice layout of towers. Now, the way that you want to lay these towers is you do want to make sure that pretty much every tower that you see has a tier 3 empowering tower near it. We're going to put this one in the middle, and you'll notice that it covers almost all of these towers. We get 3 of them covered. We're going to put a lightning tower down here, and we're going to put a stun tower down here. We're going to push this lightning tower all the way up to Arc. Arc is a very, very powerful tower, and look how lucky we got. We actually got a bunch of towers in the same area. This is pretty good luck, so keep that in mind. We are going to put another stun tower down here, and we're going to put a fireball tower down. Now, the main reason that we are doing this is because the stun towers, if you have them, like these little seismic towers, if you have them in range of a tier 3 empowering tower, they can almost perma-stun things by themselves. You see how much these enemies are getting stunned? They can do almost nothing. So that plus everything else will make it significantly easier for your towers to manage. Now, the vast majority of the work is going to be done by these arc towers. You want to make sure that you've got arc towers at pretty much every lane. So you can see here that we've got one lane coming in this way, and we have another lane coming in this way. So we have an arc tower to cover there. We have an arc tower that we're going to build up to cover here. And then you do want to put meteor towers sporadically through your defense. The reason for that is that meteor towers are significantly better at dealing with bosses. Now, depending on how your layout goes, you'll notice that I'm not even really attacking very much. The towers are kind of taking care of everything, and this is why I say that pretty much any build can do this strategy. It does depend a little bit on RNG, but for the most part, most builds can handle this as long as you get pretty good at doing actual tower defense, right? So you want to be proactive here, you want to get stun towers down, and one of the main things that you should be really focusing on as this blight map is happening is getting the tier 1 versions of your towers down, and randomly dying to things like that. So that's kind of the problem with running very high tier blighted maps. You might just randomly fall over sometimes, and that's perfectly fine. It's not a huge deal. It is one thing that you do need to be careful about with additional projectiles, because sometimes they might get a little spicy, like that there. But there are some bosses that you do want to be careful about, right? Typically what I would say, look at that. Yeah, you can kind of see what I'm talking about here. You want to be careful about some bosses because they can get a little bit spooky like that there. But for the most part, as long as you don't stand in too much bad stuff like I did there, you should be okay. So we're going to push through this. I'm just spreading out my towers, making sure that I've got stun towers in all these different areas, making sure I've got arc towers that cover lanes, and meteor towers that cover bosses. As long as you can do that, you should be mostly good. Now, as you can see, I'm getting kind of pelted there randomly. I don't remember if this map actually had additional projectiles, but they can get very dangerous, so you do have to be aware that defensives are quite important, and some of these mobs can be way more dangerous than others. But as you can kind of see, for the most part, I'm not really attacking. I'm taking care of like some stragglers in some different areas and trying to cover all of my defenses here. But for the most part, my towers are kind of handling it, right? We'll put another empowering tower there just because we don't have this covered, and we need to go worry about this side over here. For the most part, our stuff on the right is perfectly fine. So we're wanting to make sure that we get a shock tower down, a fireball tower down, as well as our tier 3 empowering, and some stun towers. You get all those down, and just move around, try to get those tier 1 towers placed so that you don't need to worry about trying to craft them later. It's significantly easier to just upgrade a tower in the heat of the moment than it is to create a whole new tower in that same spot. Now this is a pretty weak spot here, as you can see. We really do need a little bit more damage here. So we're going to put that tower down there. We're going to get a Meteor tower down there so we can handle bosses, because we're looking kind of light on boss towers here. And for the most part, we're covered. We only have about a minute and 15 seconds left, but as soon as we get this Arc tower down and this Meteor tower upgraded, I actually think we're mostly good. Oh, we need a little bit more help over here, actually. But I think we've mostly covered everything we need to. And as you can see, I really haven't been helping my towers very much. I'm kind of just chilling here and building and not doing much else. This is a eye level 81 map, which is what, like tier 13, 14, something like that. And beyond the towers, I don't really have to do very much. I kind of just stand here and AFK. So I'll keep talking a little bit so you guys can actually see this whole map go through. I want you to see the whole experience, so I'm just going to be filling a little bit here. As you keep going on, you can keep putting towers down if you need it, but I would make sure that you stay near the pump and just keep an eye on everything around you. You really do want to like check for stragglers, because sometimes there are particular kinds of mobs that can just jump past everything, or like there's like Roas and things like that that can just sometimes completely ignore all of your pumps, which is really terrible. There's lots of weird things that can happen, so you really do want to stay near the pump itself just to catch those kind of things. But as you can see, I mean, I barely had to attack very much at all. The towers just kind of took care of everything for me. But as you can see, this little boss is a straggler. Now most likely what happened here is that this boss, oh, you can see some jump past him as well, that boss was probably from a stun immune lane, and my stun towers up here couldn't actually handle him. I also didn't have a Meteor tower, so that was kind of my bad. But as long as you stay near the pump there, you can actually catch those kind of things. Now, when you get to the end of the map that you can see here, you are able to just kind of walk around and finish clearing these out. If you look at the different lanes that are going out, if you look at gray lanes, that means that lane has been completed and you've gotten the rewards for it. If you look at the yellow lanes, these are the ones that still have enemies in them and still need to be finished. So you can kind of go out and look around a little bit. Check back every once in a while, because you don't want some random like stragglers like this to just suddenly make you lose your map after you've already been all the way through it. But that's about it. Then you can go and pick up all the rewards, and you can press Alt and potentially crash your computer, as you can see here, because of the ridiculous amount of items that GGG puts in this game. So you've seen how the Blighted maps actually go. I got relatively lucky with the layout there, so that one was way easier than normal. But even in a like bosses have more health, yellow rolled corrupted map with, you know, all kinds of stuff going on, we had a bunch of things that were immune to stuns, and we still did relatively fine with not very much, you know, attacking of our own. So now we're going to talk about the actual loot. Now, the main ways that you're going to make money in these Blighted maps is going to be these Divination card chests, as well as the Blight oil chests. Now, the main money makers beyond that, currency chests are good, Harbinger chests are okay. The rest of them are kind of whatever. You do still want to open up everything, but for the most part, when I'm moving through here, I stopped picking up 6 sockets just because they take up so much inventory, and time is actually pretty important beyond that. Now, when it comes to these, stack decks are actually worth a lot of money, and I would say that you should sell your stack decks in big bulks for either lots of chaos or lots of exalts at one time. Typically, there are people out there who will pay significantly more for stack decks if you sell to them in like 400 or 500 at a time, right? I found that the prophecy ones really didn't do too much for me. I mean, they don't even show up on my filter. But for the most part, oils as well as divination cards were good. Now, oils were actually pretty spotty for me. I think I got okay, of course, I'm going to drop a golden oil as I say that the oils are spotty for me. But oils, over the course of the entire thing, I did 50 maps, and I actually think I got pretty unlucky on oils from what I've seen some other people do. But I didn't get very many oils until that golden oil, of course. But, you know, streamer RNG, what can you do? But for the most part, it was just exalts, chaos, a good amount of oils. Something that you shouldn't sleep on are essences. Essences are actually really powerful right now, and they do sell quite well. One big thing that essences are good for is if you get things like Essence of Rage and such like that, that can craft like stat gear. There's very few ways to craft gear that has stats on it. Essences are one of the only ways that you can do that. You can actually make a decent amount of money with just selling essences. And beyond that, you just get a bunch of random currency, among other things. Now, I'm not going to bore you with the rest of the items that I pick up in this map. I'll go ahead and pick them up, and then we'll do the final word after. Wow, another silver oil in this map. Alright, so now that we've actually picked up all of the items from the Blighted map, you'll see that this is what we're left with. Now, on average, you're going to be spending about 35 chaos per Blighted map in the tier 13 to tier 16 range right now. Those prices may change in the future. This video should work for quite some time, so keep in mind that that price may not be exactly what it is for whatever time that you're in if you're somewhere in the future. But just looking at the items we got roughly 17 stacked decks, which you can sell for 2, maybe 2.5 chaos each. That's going to be most of the cost of the actual map itself. These were in our inventory from before. We got a ton of oils. I'm not going to count the golden oil, and I'm not going to count the silver oil because those are a little bit lucky, but these teal oils are worth about 0.5 chaos each, so we got about 4.5, 5 chaos there. Violet oils are worth about 1 chaos. Crimson oils are worth about 2 chaos, and then all of these essences can be anywhere from 1 to 2 chaos depending on how much bulk you're selling of them and what tier they are and such. And then beyond that, we got some scarabs, we got a bunch of other little currencies. So even in a situation where you didn't get that golden oil and you didn't get that silver oil, we would still have more than made up the currency that we spent to actually get the map itself. So if you really just look at the raw currency that you're generating, from just the basic items that you get, you more than make up the difference in what it costs to roll it, and then all of the extra big stuff are just bonuses on top of that. So I would say in this particular map, we probably made, I don't know, probably like 50C, maybe 50, 60C if we're really looking at absolutely selling everything that we got here 100%, and we waited until we could sell them in bulk. I'd probably say that's the profits that we made, and it only took us, I don't know, 5 or 10 minutes. So when it comes to investment versus time, the strategy can actually be pretty good. You're not going to get a ton of currency most of the time per map, but the actual amount that you make over the course of time with all of the ones that you're selling is pretty solid. Now, I do want to give actually credit to Dirt, one of my mods, that there is a pretty good trick. I know this is just a little thing at the end of the video, but if you do have issues figuring out where the pump is, like on your screen, you just kind of get lost, you can actually take your portal and just put the portal right next to the pump, and then you've got this nice blue circle on your minimap that'll show you exactly where the pump is. Thought I'd just let you know because it was actually a pretty good trick. And then when you're actually done with the map itself, you come back, you're going to dump all of your currency and everything into all of your tabs. I suggest that you just get a dump tab that you can put all of your extra stuff in, run like 10 maps, sort it all together, start selling everything in big bulks. You really will make much more currency in general if you do try to sell these things in bulk. People tend to not want to buy like one of an essence or one of a divination card or something like that. They want to buy a whole bunch at one time. So if you pack these up and you sell them in like, say you sold essences in like stacks of 30 or 40, right? Like that many essences all together, you could probably get like 1.5 or 2 times the amount of money that you would sell them for normally, just because you're saving that person so much time of buying each and every little essence. So potentially there is a lot more money here than even what I'm saying. It could be even more than 30 Exalt, because the program that I use, which is Exilents Next, it goes off of the base price of the currency. It doesn't go off of bulk pricing. It doesn't go off of any of that. So it could even be more money if you're doing bulk pricing. And that is going to be it for the video. Now, hopefully I was able to alleviate some of your concerns about Blighted maps, worrying that you're not going to be able to complete them. You honestly can get pretty good practice just doing Blights in maps. You can do those first with Lyra Arthane, like I said earlier in the video, and then once you get comfortable with the strategy that I told you, you can move into some low-tier Blight maps, move your way all up into the high-tier ones. As soon as you actually get those strategies like down pat, it really isn't as hard as it might seem. You don't even need a good build, you don't even need to attack most of the time. I only attacked a couple times in the actual example. So just be aware that you can fail these maps, it can happen. You can get absolutely hard screwed over sometimes. When I was streaming this over at twitch.tv/BigDucks, which you should go follow, by the way, I even failed, I think, 2 or 3 of my maps just because I got so hard screwed by the game. Like the layouts were terrible. It can happen, but once you get pretty good at it, it shouldn't happen very often. So remember, boys, if you have questions or difficulties with any of the things in my videos, make sure that you join my Discord. There's a bunch of helpful people over there, and you too can actually help other people as well if you are knowledgeable about these kinds of things. But just join and come and hang out with the community. There's a bunch of nice people over there, and I'd appreciate having you there. So remember, boys, if you enjoy the video and you don't want to make Douglas sad, make sure that you like it, and also subscribe to the YouTube channel for more content similar to this, and stay safe out there in ranked class. And I'll see you guys in the next video.